Lord of the Flies, Chapter 5, Part 2. What place? Just a place I know, a place in the jungle. He hesitated. Jack settled the question for them with that contempt in his voice that sounded so funny and so final. He was taken short. With a feeling of humiliation on Simon's behalf, Ralph took back the conch, looking Simon sternly in the face as he did so. Well, don't do it again, understand? Not at night. There's enough silly talk about beasts without the little ones seeing you gliding about like a... The derisive laughter that rose had fear in it and condemnation. Simon opened his mouth to speak, but Ralph had the conch, so he backed up to his seat. When the assembly was silent, Ralph turned to Piggy. Well, Piggy? There was another one, him. The little ones pushed Percival forward, then left him by himself. He stood knee-deep in the central grass, looking at his hidden feet, trying to pretend he was in a tent. Ralph remembered another small boy who had stood like this, and he flinched away from the memory. He had pushed the thought down and out of sight, where only some positive reminder like this could bring it to the surface. There had been no further numberings of the little ones, partly because there were no means of ensuring that all of them were accounted for, and partly because Ralph knew the answer to at least one question Piggy had asked on the mountain-top. There were little boys, fair, dark, freckled, and all dirty, but their faces were all dreadfully free of major blemishes. No one had seen the mulberry-coloured birthmark again. By that time Piggy had coaxed and bullied. Tactically admitting that he remembered the unmentionable, Ralph nodded to Piggy. Go on, ask him. Piggy knelt, holding the conch. Now then, what's your name? The small boy twisted away into his tent. Piggy turned helplessly to Ralph, who spoke sharply. What's your name? Tormented by the silence and the refusal, the assembly broke into a chant. What's your name? What's your name? Quiet! Ralph peered at the child in the twilight. Now tell us, what's your name? Percival Williams Madison, the Vicarage, Harcourt, St. Anthony's, Hants, telephone, As if this information was rooted far down in the springs of sorrow, the little one wept. His face puckered, the tears leapt from his eyes, his mouth opened till they could see a square black hole. At first he was a silent effigy of sorrow, but then the lamentation rose out of him, loud and sustained as the conch. Shut up, you, shut up. Percival Williams Madison would not shut up. A spring had been tapped far beyond the reach of authority or even physical intimidation. The crying went on, breath after breath, and seemed to sustain him upright as if he were nailed to it. Shut up! Shut up! For now the little ones were no longer silent. They were reminded of their personal sorrows, and perhaps they felt themselves to share in a sorrow that was universal. They began to cry in sympathy, two of them almost as loud as Percival. Maurice saved them. He cried out, Look at me! He pretended to fall over. He rubbed his rump and sat on the twister so that he fell in the grass. He downed badly, but Percival and the others noticed and sniffed and laughed. Presently, they were all laughing so absurdly that the big uns joined in. Jack was the first to make himself heard. He had not got the conch and thus spoke against the rules, but nobody minded. And what about the beast? Something strange was happening to Percival. He yawned and staggered so that Jack seized and shook him. Where does the beast live? Percival sagged in Jack's grip. That's a clever beast, said Piggy, jeering, if he can hide on this island. Jack's been everywhere. Where could a beast live? Beast my foot. Percival muttered something, and the assembly laughed again. Ralph leaned forward. What does he say? Jack listened to Percival's answer, then let him go. Percival, released, surrounded by the comfortable presence of humans, fell in the long grass and went to sleep. Jack cleared his throat, then reported casually, He says the beast comes out of the sea. The last laugh died away. Ralph turned involuntarily, a black, humped figure against the lagoon. The assembly looked with him, considered the vast stretches of water, the high sea beyond, unknown indigo of infinite possibility, heard silently the sough and whisper from the reef. Maurice spoke so loudly that they all jumped. Daddy said they haven't found all the animals in the sea yet. Argument started again. Ralph held out the glimmering conch and Maurice took it obediently. The meeting subsided. I mean, when Jack says you can be frightened because people are frightened anyway, that's all right. But when he says there's only pigs on this island, I expect he's right, but he doesn't know, not really. Not certainly, I mean. Maurice took a breath. My daddy says there's things, what do you call them, that make ink? Squids. They're hundreds of yards long and they eat whales whole. He paused again and laughed gaily. I don't believe in the beast, of course. As Piggy said, life's scientific, but we don't know, do we? Not certainly, I mean. Someone shouted. A squid couldn't come up out of the water. Could? Couldn't? In a moment, the platform was full of arguing, gesticulating shadows. To Ralph, seated, this seemed the breaking up of sanity. Fear, beasts, no general agreement, and the fire was all important, and when one tried to get the thing straight, the argument sheared off, bringing up fresh, unpleasant matter. He could see a whiteness in the gloom near him, so he grabbed it from Maurice and blew as loudly as he could. The assembly was shocked into silence. Simon was close to him, laying his hands on the conch. Simon felt a perilous necessity to speak, that to speak in assembly was a terrible thing to him. Maybe, he said hesitantly, maybe there is a beast. The assembly cried out savagely, and Ralph stood up in amazement. You, Simon, you believe in this? I don't know, said Simon. His heartbeats were choking him. But the storm broke. Sit down, shut up, take the conch, sod you, shut up. Ralph shouted. Hear him, he's got the conch. What I mean is, maybe it's only us. Nuts! That was from Piggy, shocked out of decorum. Simon went on. We could be sort of... Simon became inarticulate in his effort to express mankind's essential illness. Inspiration came to him. What's the dirtiest thing there is? As an answer, Jack dropped the uncomprehending silence that followed it, the one crude expressive syllable. Release was immense. Those littlings who had climbed back on the twister fell off again and did not mind. The hunters were screaming with delight. Simon's effort fell about him in ruins. The laughter beat him cruelly, and he shrank away defenceless to his seat. At least the assembly was silent again. Someone spoke out of turn. Maybe he means it's some sort of ghost. Ralph lifted the conch and peered into the gloom. The lightest thing was the pale beach. Surely the littlings were nearer. Yes, there was no doubt about it. They were huddled in a tight knot of bodies in the central grass. The flurry of wind made the palms talk, and the noise seemed very loud now. Darkness and silence made it so noticeable. Two grey trunks rubbed each other with an evil speaking that no one had noticed by day. Piggy took the conch out of his hands. His voice was indignant. I don't believe in no ghosts, ever. Jack was up too, unaccountably angry. Who cares what you believe, fatty? I got the conch. There was a sound of a brief tussle when the conch moved to and fro. You give me the conch back. Ralph pushed between them and got a thump in the chest. He wrestled the conch from someone and sat down breathlessly. There's too much talk about ghosts. We ought to have left this all for daylight. A hushed and anonymous voice broke in. Perhaps that's what the beast is, a ghost. The assembly was shaken as by a wind. There's too much talking out of turn, Ralph said, because we can't have proper assemblies if you don't stick to the rules. He stopped again. The careful plan of this assembly had broken down. What do you want me to say then? I was wrong to call this assembly so late. We'll have a vote on them. On ghosts, I mean. And then go to the shelters because we're all tired. No, Jack, is it? Wait a minute. I'll say here and now that I don't believe in ghosts. Or I don't think I do. But I don't like the thought of them. Now, not now, that is, in the dark. But we were going to decide what's important. He raised the conch for a moment. Very well then. I suppose what's what is whether there are ghosts or not. He thought for a moment, formulating the question. Who thinks there may be ghosts? For a long time there was silence and no apparent movement. Then Ralph peered into the gloom and made out the hands. He spoke flatly. I see. The world, the understandable and lawful world, was slipping away. Once there was this and that, and now, and the ship had gone. The conch was snatched from his hands and Piggy's voice shrilled. I didn't vote for no ghosts. He whirled round in the assembly. Remember that, all of you. They heard him stamp. What are we? Humans? Or animals? Or savages? What's grown-ups going to think? Going off, hunting pigs, letting fires out, and now... A shadow fronted him tempestuously. You shut up, you fat slug. There was a moment's struggle and the glimmering conch jingled up and down. Ralph leapt to his feet. Jack, you haven't got the conch. Let him speak. Jack's face spun near him. And you shut up. Who are you anyway? Sitting there telling people what to do. You can't hunt, you can't sing. I'm chief, I was chosen. Why should choosing make any difference? Just giving orders that doesn't make sense. Piggy's got the conch, that's right. Favour Piggy as you always do. Jack's voice sounded in bitter mercy. Jack, the rules, shouted Ralph. You're breaking the rules. Who cares? Ralph summoned his wits. Because the rules are the only thing we've got. But Jack was shouting against him. Bollocks to the rules. We're strong. We hunt. If there's a beast, we'll hunt it down. We'll close in and beat and beat and beat. He gave a wild whoop and leapt down to the pale sand. At once the platform was full of noise and excitement. Scrambling, screams and laughter. The assembly shredded away and became discursive and random scatter from the palms to the water and away along the beach beyond night sight. Ralph felt his cheek touching the conch and took it from Piggy. What's grown-ups going to say? Cried Piggy again. Look at 'em. The sound of mock hunting, hysterical laughter and real terror came from the beach. Blow the conch, Ralph. Piggy was so close that Ralph could see the glint in his one glass. There's the fire, can't they see? You've got to be tough now, make him do what you want. Ralph answered in the cautious voice of one who rehearses a theorem. If I blow the conch and they don't come back, then we've had it. We shan't keep the fire going. We'll be like animals. We'll never be rescued. If you don't blow, we'll soon be animals anyway. I can't see what they're going, but I can hear. I can't see what they're doing, but I can hear. The dispersed figures had come together on the sand and were a dense black mass that revolved. They were chanting something, and littlings that had had enough were staggering away, howling. Ralph raised the conch to his lips and then lowered it. The trouble is, are there ghosts, Piggy, or beasts? Of course there aren't. Why not? because things wouldn't make sense. Houses and streets and TV, they wouldn't work. The dancing, chanting boys had worked themselves away till their sound was nothing but a wordless rhythm. But suppose they don't make sense, not here on this island. Supposing things are watching us and waiting. Ralph shuddered violently and moved closer to Piggy so that they bumped frighteningly. You stop talking like that. We've got enough trouble, Ralph, and I've had as much as I can stand. If there is ghosts, I ought to give up being chief. Hear him. Oh, Lord. Oh, no. Piggy gripped Ralph's arm. If Jack was chief, we'd have all hunting and no fire. We'd be here till we died. His voice ran up to a squeak. Who's that sitting there? Me, Simon. Fat lot of good we are, said Ralph. 3 blind mice. I'll give up. If you give up, said Piggy in a pulled whisper, what happened to me? Nothing. He hates me. I don't know why. If he could do what he wanted, you're all right. He respects you. Besides, you'd hit him. We were having a nice fight with him just now. I had the conch, said Piggy simply. I had a right to speak. Simon stared in the dark. Go on, being chief. You shut up, young Simon. Why couldn't you say there wasn't a beast? I'm scared of him, said Piggy, and that's why I know him. If you're scared of someone you hate, but you can't stop thinking about him, you kid yourself he's all right, really, and then when you see him again, it's like asthma, you can't breathe. I'll tell you what, he hates you too, Ralph. Me? Why me? I don't know, but you've got him over the fire, and you're chief and he isn't. But he's Jack married you. I've been in bed, so I've done some thinking. I know about people. I know about me and him. He can't hurt you, but if you stand out of the way, he'd hurt the next thing, and that's me. Piggy's right, Ralph. There's you and Jack. Go on being chief. We're all drifting and things are going rotten. At home there was always a grown-up. Please, sir, please, miss. And then he got an answer. How I wish. Wish my auntie was here. Wish my father. Oh, what's the use? Keep the fire going. The dance was over and the hunters were going back to the shelters. Grown-ups know things, said Piggy. They ain't afraid of the dark. They meet and have tea and discuss. Then things would be all right. They wouldn't set fire to the island or lose. They'd build a ship. The 3 boys stood in the darkness, striving unsuccessfully to convey the majesty of adult life. They wouldn't quarrel or break my specs or talk about a beast. If only they could get a message to us, cried Ralph desperately. If only they could send us something grown up, a sign or something. A thin wail out of the darkness chilled them and set them grabbing for each other. Then the wail rose, remote and unearthly, and turned to an inarticulate gibbering. Percival Webby's Madison of the vicarage, Harcourt St. Anthony, lying on the long grass, was living through circumstances in which the incantation of his address was powerless to help him.